Let's move on to David Lammy then, and he was tweeting this out yesterday. The climate and nature crisis is the most profound and universal source of global disorder. We're resetting Britain's approach to this agenda. Climate and nature will be central to all the Foreign Office does. Now, why would that be? Is that about climate change and mitigation of climate change, or is it about geopolitics? Let's just have a listen to a minute and a half or so of what Lammy said yesterday.
But we need a hard-headed, realist approach towards using all levers at our disposal, from the diplomatic to the financial. And I say to you now, these are not contradictions, because nothing could be more central to the UK's national interests than delivering global progress on arresting rising temperatures. My argument to you today is that demands for action from the world's most vulnerable and the requirements for delivering security for British citizens are fundamentally aligned. And this is because the crisis is not some discrete policy area divorced from geopolitics and insecurity. The threat may not feel as urgent as a terrorist or an imperialist autocrat, but it is more fundamental. It is systemic, it's pervasive, and accelerating towards us at pace. Look around the world. Countries are scrambling to secure critical minerals, just as great powers once raced to control oil. We cannot let this become a source of conflict. In the Arctic and Antarctic, global warming is driving geopolitical competition over the resources lying beneath the ice. And in places like the Sahel, South Sudan, Syria, rising temperatures are making water and productive land even scarcer. These are not random events delivered from the heavens.
Sorry, I got caught there. It must be catching. Maybe it's a disease. These are not random events. These are absolutely not random events. That's probably the only thing I agree with him on in that particular segment. But what we very clearly get from that is that the agenda isn't about temperature or climate or any perceived climate emergency. It's about raw materials. It's about assets under the ground or under the ice or wherever it happens to be. And of course, the Arctic is mentioned and so on. We'll come on to that in a second. So this is a graphic that we're pushing out on Twitter this morning. We will build a global clean power alliance. Well, I'm not clear how they're going to do that, since half the world seems to have gone the other way with BRICS and so on, but they're going to build this global clean power alliance, unlock more climate finance. That's another key part of this, and reverse the decline in global biodiversity. Nonsense. They're not doing anything to do any of that. In fact, with the warfare that they're pursuing, they're only increasing the decline in global biodiversity. But just this whole idea of the Sahel, of the Arctic, and so on. Let's just remind ourselves of some of the comments that we've seen in recent weeks. This is from Jens Stoltenberg talking about NATO and not wanting to view moving NATO into the South China Sea, but taking into account that China is coming closer to us in the Arctic, in Africa. This narrative about the Arctic, the Antarctic, and the Sahel is something that we see time and time and time again from multiple voices. It is something that is clearly a common narrative that's been decided upon. The European Union, very in particular, interested in the Sahel region in particular, and so is the UK with their regional development partnership that goes back a number of years. And we can't forget Tony Blair's absolute interest in this area, the Tony Blair Institute, very active in the Sahel region. The question is why. We'll see in a second. This is something that the Africans are particularly keen to sort of push back against. But we've got to remember why this is. This is because the Russians, the Chinese, are active in that area. They are developing those countries. They're providing infrastructure and so on. This is something that the West perceives as getting out of its control very, very quickly, and something that they feel that they need to deal with very, very quickly. But Lammy's speech, nothing to do with temperature of the atmosphere, and everything to do with raw materials and what we can dig out of the ground, and making sure that we maintain control of what can be dug out of the ground. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I think he sort of joins the queue of ministers to whom we should invert everything they say when we listen to them. I mean, he's really talking about the exact opposite that his words suggest, and particularly on the mineral side of it, and not just the destruction of the landscape that we're supposed to be protecting under all this sort of rhetoric, but also the enormous cost to life and welfare of the people that are forced to mine cobalt and lithium and all the rest of it. But of course, that's never referred to.
No, indeed. Okay, well, let's